Well, hello YouTube, this is Layout123 and we're going to be taking a look at this nice Hornby loco. And this is a first real steam locomotive, and I'm dreadful with the names of steam locomotives, so I will actually, when I do the video, put up what it is called, but I am so sorry everybody, but I have forgotten. So let's start off with the basics and let's take a look at the detailing. And the detailing for this model is pretty decent. I have to say it's probably some of the best standard detailing I think I've seen in a Hornby model in many a year. And if we look at the just even the front of it, we've got that sort of nice shine off of it. It all glistens and gleams. It's very nice. The cabin detailing is really where this thing is just, oh goodness me, it's dreadful, isn't it? There's a few little parts in there and pistons, but it's just pathetic. I think this model could have been a very successful model if it had that cabin detail. Just an interesting fact about the real train, that unlike most of the steam locomotives where you see the wheels with the pistons, like for example the Royal Scot, you can see we've got all the pistons and all of that down the side of it. This one is different in the fact that it is all incorporated inside on the real train. Just a little interesting fact for you as well about that. And well, what better way to move on and to talk about the tender. And the tender is brilliant because it's got the realistic chuffing sound, which you may be able to hear, you may not. You will hear it when it is running. The tender has some great coal detailing in it as well, and the overall appearance of the tender is perfect. It's a little bit lightweight, is probably my only issue with it. Could do with a bit of weight in it, just to give it a little bit more realism, because when it does couple up to trains it sort of jolts a little bit, but that's just being extremely picky. Extremely picky. And if we look at the wheels on the underneath, they're all pretty much perfect, and all the way in the middle there is the Hornby logo, and made in China as well. Another thing to point out is that this model is not tender driven, and those of you who are familiar with my channel, I have huge issues with tender driven locos. I just do not get on with them, and I have to say this one is one of the best modern examples, because we do see sort of all the older trains like the Royal Scot, which does have the motor within the train. We do see a lot more of them now in Hornby, and I think Hornby is starting to get back to that, because when you have a tender driven loco, just pretend this is a tender driven loco, it hooks up, and then when it goes to leave, you don't get any of the classic wheel spin before the train leaves the platform. It just sort of glides out of the platform, and it just looks ridiculous. And I think that's something that Hornby really sort of, when they look back, have realised that that was a mistake. Obviously there are still tender driven locos, and I don't think they're all bad, but I certainly would say that they've done a real good job with this one. And something else to point out is the Royal Scots tender has some variation of the realistic chuffing sound in the middle there, but I don't, for the life of me, it doesn't make any noise. That just doesn't sound like chuffing at all. And another great example of this, which is the train that is well known for it, would be the Flying Scotsman, obviously, with the realistic chuffing sound tender as well. And that's probably the one out of all of them that sounds the most like chuffing. But it's good to see that Hornby have gone back to the original ideas of trying and really have made the simple things effective, because as nice as the realistic sound locos are, there's some charm about the sound of that, and I think you'll all agree with me. On a little bit off track really with this, and let's go back to the original purpose of this review. I love the idea of the pin connecting up to the tender. I think that's pretty much a decent idea and a clever idea, and another thing about it is it's interchangeable if it does break, and they're quite easy to obtain on eBay and that sort of thing if you wanted to buy them, or you've got the option of finding one at a train fair. There's always plenty of options out there if you do want to get spares. It's just a shame Hornby and Bachmann, two companies that don't really focus on putting spares in the boxes, and sometimes a spare here and there would really help when it comes to this hobby. Just another thing to point out before we get it onto the layout is the couplings of the wider base, which I personally prefer. I cannot stand silly little couplings like you get on the, for example, these Bachmann things. They just come uncoupled. I don't understand why we can't have the wider coupling base. I just don't get that. That's one of those things I will never be able to understand. And I think I've rattled on and babbled on for far too long, and all you lot want to see is this doing what it does best, and that is flying around the layout. And we can then talk about the running performance. And here we go. Nice and slow and steady start. And this one has got a pretty smooth motor. A very quiet motor as well. Very reliable. Then again, having said that, if you don't use it, it can seize up a little bit, so it's one of those you need to give a run in every now and then. You can't just leave it. Let's get some simple shots now. If I was to rate it out of 10, I think I'd give it a 7. For it to be 10 for me, you really have to have some sort of cabin detail. I think if Hornby had put that little bit more cabin detail, or even some drivers in there, it would have just really have given that model, this model, that extra little bit of lift that it could really... Actually, no, I couldn't really do with it, but it's just a personal preference. And that might be me being picky, but if you have a look at some of the modern Bachmann locos, they are excellent for their cabin detail. So, you've heard me talk for a little while, and you've seen the train. What do you think? Do you think this train is good? Do you like it? Would you buy it? Or do you think it's absolute rubbish? Either way, I'd like to hear what you think. And thank you all very much for watching, and see you all very soon.